Hello, welcome to Revenant Reads. I'm Vin, and this is the monthly reading wrap-up for October of 2024. So, I have a little stack of books here. I read 6 books in October. I'm going to basically, in this video, I'm just going to summarize the things that I read and give you my overall thoughts. I'm not going to go in depth because all the books I'm going to be discussing, I have described my thoughts in more detail in previous videos that I call Fresh Read Kills. Without further ado, and this is just a general summary, so I'm not going to take a very long time with any of these. I read, to start off the month, John Meacham's The Soul of America, The Battle for a Better Angels. This is one of those books that various historical writers put out after the election of Donald Trump, the first election. We're still a couple days away from election season as I write this, but by the time this is released, I don't know who's going to be president or who's going to be the next president. But we saw a lot of, I would say, national soul searching after Trump was elected. People basically trying to understand the moment and see, if the United States has ever been in this sort of precarious situation before, and if not, what maybe lessons we can learn from the past to try and move forward. And Meacham, I think, this is kind of what he was doing here. So essentially, he looks at American history from the end of the Civil War up until really through 1960s, the Civil Rights Movement, and the ways that the American nation was sort of fighting with itself, okay, looking for their better souls. So things about like race relations, women's rights, civil rights, that sort of thing. And seeing that kind of pendulum swing back and forth, and not just those sorts of struggles, but especially in particular, how did presidents handle them at that time? That ends up being a pretty big focus, and he gives a lot of attention to things like Teddy Roosevelt and FDR, Lyndon Johnson as well. And some others, right? So some presidents come out better than others in how they handle these situations. But I enjoyed this. I liked it. I thought Meacham did a pretty good job here, and that sounds interesting to you, I would recommend it. Next, I had read King Lear. At least I had read the introductory essay here in September, then I read the play. Reread the play in October. So yes, it was a reread, and this is one of my favorite Shakespeare plays. Probably it's not my all-time favorite. I think right now my all-time favorite is Macbeth, but when I read this first in high school, it was my favorite, and I still really enjoyed it this time. And the introductory essay gave me a lot of interesting insight, even if it is kind of outdated. I remember, I didn't say this in my original video, but the suspicion that the Fool and Cordelia were probably played by the same actor, because they never share a stage together, these two characters. Those sorts of things are kind of interesting little insights into the play. But yeah, this is, I think, one of Shakespeare's best tragedies. So if you want to check out one of his tragedies and you haven't read it yet, I definitely would recommend King Lear. And I read Poe. This biography by James N. Hutchisson. This was put out by University Press of Mississippi, and this is pretty good. It is kind of a straightforward biography. It goes from Poe's childhood up to his death, and does so in it's meant to be a popular history, but it is, it's more on the scholarly edge of things, I think, the way that it's written. But it does give some nice literary analysis as well. And one of the things that I did warn inside my discussion of this is that the audiobook version of this actually has an error, where it says that an interview that from 1870s was conducted on tape, and tape didn't exist in the 1870s. But in the book, it does not say tape. It does say that they were just notes. So just, basically buyer beware. If you are going to read the physical copy, you will not see the error. But if you listen to the audiobook, you will hear an error. Just know that that is an error in the audiobook. It is not one inside the original copy. But those looking to learn more about Poe, again, with a little more of a more academic take on things. This is not exactly a popular history, I would definitely recommend this. I also had read in the second half of October American Psycho by Bret, Easton, Ellis. An infamous book made into, I think, a pretty decent movie with Christian Bale, one that I enjoy back in, it came out in 2000 maybe, but this is his 1991 bloody satire of kind of Wall Street executives and yuppies in the 1980s, where we have the main character, Patrick Bateman, who we see everything through his eyes, who is a serial killer, but he is also very shallow and obsessed with name brands and only going to the trendiest restaurants and obsessed with, like, his look. Women are either hard bodies or they're not worth looking at. This is at turns gross with its violence. It's both its sex and its violence are incredibly graphic, and I would say pornographic. But then sometimes it's actually really funny. And then I say other times it's just kind of a little bit boring because we're just basically seeing Patrick Bateman to look at everybody's suits. So yeah, I did overall like it, but I wouldn't say I loved it. But yeah, I thought it was really interesting. And I read this one here, The Crooked Path, An Introduction to Traditional Witchcraft by Kelden. I am not a traditional witch. I'm not a believer in magic. But I am interested in the kind of cross-section between ritual and nature-based spirituality, and also the incorporation of folklore and myth. And, even as an atheist, I do believe there's value in that intersection. And I've been exploring that through different traditions and seeing the way they do things. So traditional witchcraft was something that I've been interested in learning more about. And I thought this book did a pretty good job of explaining it. Kelden, he not only kind of gives you some of the folklore, he explains the basics of traditional witchcraft, but he also has exercises in here along the way to have the practitioner actually start practicing witchcraft. So like I said, I'm not a witch, but and there are extraordinary claims in here that I don't necessarily believe, but I do think that there's still some value to be had in a lot of the kind of practices and things that they do. So if you do want to learn more about traditional witchcraft, I do think this is actually a pretty good place to look. So I'd recommend it for that. And the last thing that I had read during the month of October was a teaching book. I believe I didn't check the author again before since making my last video about it, because if you look at my videos, you'll see I'm wearing the same shirt in like 4 or 5 videos because I just sit down and make a bunch of videos in a row, and then I just kind of release them over a couple of days. But I think it's Dave Burgess, and he wrote a book, Teach Like a Pirate. So myself and my fellow teachers at my school, my team, we decided to read some books together, and that was the first one. So we read it, and we've been discussing it over weeks, and essentially what Dave Burgess is looking to do is inspire people in the way that they present their information to students. So it's not just about the content, it's also about the performance. It's about there are certain theatricality that you can have, ways to get their attention, ways to get their interest going, ways to make connections with students. So yeah, we've found a lot of value in reading and considering those ideas. But that is what I read in October of 2024. So again, Teach Like a Pirate, but then also The Soul of America, King Lear, Poe, American Psycho, and The Crooked Path. And if you've read any of these, love your thoughts. And as always, thank you, BookTube.